Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you from the Global ESCO Network on the ESCO market in the Philippines, a recipe for success. We have with us today Alexander Ableza, who is the chairman of the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, one of the most active ESCO alliances in our network, and in one of the most successful markets for ESCO services. The Global ESCO Network, which I have the honor of chairing, is based in Copenhagen with United Nations Environment Programme, the Copenhagen Climate Center. We are collaborating with the Efficiency Evaluation Organization for its implementation. And let me just give you a few details on the network before we start today's presentation. The Global ESCO Network is motivated by climate change, and it works for the integrated use of the ESCO industry as implementing partners for widespread investment in energy efficiency. The mission is to add to and reinforce existing efforts of national and regional ESCO associations, of which the Philippine ESCO Association is one, to promote increased activities by the ESCO industry at global scale. We find that energy efficiency investments are among the most efficient, cost-efficient or profitable investments that we can do in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and thus serve the Paris Agreement's objectives. I will not go into further detail about the Global ESCO Network. You can find us on our website, and we have had, I think we are approaching 30 webinars on ESCOs and topics related to ESCOs, which are all on our website. So I presume that most of you are already familiar with us and our activities, but I will share with you one piece of news, and that might even not be news to many of you, which is the fact that we are organizing the second International ESCO Symposium this year in Istanbul on the 7th and 8th of May, where we are gathering 200 or more ESCO professionals and stakeholders for a 2-day session. It is hosted by and organized by our Turkish ESCO Association partner in the network, IODER, and you can check out the program, which by now is finalized with confirmed speakers on the ESCO Symposium's own website, which is managed by IODER, or you can find it also at the Global ESCO Network's website. In Istanbul, you would also have the chance to meet Alex, our speaker today, in person. And I'm sure that would be of interest to many of you. As I mentioned before, Philippines is in fact one of the most successful ESCO markets that we are generally using as examples, for how ESCO markets should be organized. So I'm looking very much forward to Alex's presentation today. And if you would like to find out more about the Philippines, there are a Q&A session afterwards. Note that there is a Q&A button that you can activate, and you just type in your question. We will have the Q&A sessions as one session after Alex's presentation. And if that does not suffice, I welcome you very much to join us in Istanbul, where Alex will also be presenting. So I hope you enjoy today's presentation and webinar, and I hand over the microphone to Alex. Welcome, Alex.
Good morning to all in Americas. Good afternoon to all those in Europe and Africa and the Middle East, and good evening to my colleagues in Asia. It's really is a great pleasure to be speaking again in the Global ESCO Network. So let me spend a few minutes describing the success in the ESCO market. Suren has used the word success a couple of times. Success need not be the size of the ESCO market or the number of ESCOs or the volume of ESCO investments. I think the way that we want to use the word success here is that the way that civil society, the private sector, help policymakers and government really work together in transforming the ESCO market from just a few existing ESCOs to where it is today. So I wear also the hat of APIA. APIA stands for the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance. And we now have 10 ESCO associations, all part of the global ESCO network, of course. So we have China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Taiwan, and Thailand, all working together, starting with knowledge exchange and going through our aspirational tasks of enabling market conditions and even enabling cross-border ESCO business. Let me talk about the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. It's a nonprofit. We started in 2005 as a pure ESCO association, but in 2016 we reorganized and welcomed 4 other membership organizations. So aside from the ESCOs, which we call the regular A members, we now have a regular B membership for technology solutions service providers and professional and consulting firms. We have a regular C for financial services, financial institutions, investors, equity providers, and project developers. We have an associate D for foreign chambers, nonprofits, the academe, science and policy research institutes. And we have an associate E for end users. So we have cement manufacturers, we have a petroleum company, we have a telecom company, all those that are who have mainstream energy efficiency in their core day-to-day operations. And together, all these 5 membership categories, we work together, helping government and helping the rest of the market towards energy efficiency policy reform, developing the market with new capacities, collaborating with our colleagues in the region and globally, and expanding business-to-business networks. And this is the way we see the energy efficiency market and the ESCO market should be transformed. So we now have close to 70 members, all of across these 5 membership categories. And it's really the objective to sustain a long market transformation, to make it apolitical. So no matter what happens in the government side, PE2 will just sustain the transformation of the energy efficiency and ESCO market. Let's talk about policy and how policy is deployed so that energy efficiency is mainstream as the first fuel of the economy. We have always pitched that energy efficiency should be positioned in the market with a major paradigm shift. Not only should it be a net zero component, it should be a significant component of the national determined contributions under the Paris climate obligations of the Philippines. We should make it the primary energy resource in any energy plan that government makes. We should make sure that policy and market forces allow the so-called priority dispatch, or to position energy efficiency first, even ahead of other clean energy sources such as renewables. We should attract investment capital flows and project structuring for energy efficiency as a type of infrastructure. We should deploy energy efficiency also as a clean energy source, and also make sure that equity and debt capital flows towards this new investment asset class called energy efficiency, which is not exactly the same as renewable energy as an asset class. And the Philippines thinks that to shave off 182 million tons of oil equivalent in end use, in final energy demand through 2040, we need to mobilize no less than $243 billion to bridge an energy efficiency gap in the next 2 decades. PE2 believes that global energy markets should gravitate towards planning energy efficiency as a primary energy resource, an indigenous fuel to be dispatched with priority. The chart that you see in the slide is that of Cambodia, not of the Philippines. But the Philippines is on a journey towards this. In the chart of Cambodia, you see its generation plan through 2040, having energy efficiency in the light green bars as part of their energy mix alongside all their imported energy within the region, alongside battery, solar, biomass, fuel, hydro, and coal. So energy efficiency is planned as an energy resource through the long term. And this follows the very concept that the Philippines has been pitching to government and in the region, that you don't build capacities of what can be shaved off in the first place. So Cambodia has done a fantastic job. The Philippine Energy Plan is following this path very, very closely. In the Philippines, again, if we succeed in shaving off 182 million tons of oil equivalent in final energy consumption through 2040, there are economic, energy security, and climate change mitigation impacts. For economic, we're looking at $720 billion in avoided energy purchases. We are a net energy importer, so you're looking at fantastic reduced dependence on imported fossil fuels. You keep in mind, in Southeast Asia, there are only two countries which are real net energy importers, that we don't export basically. Uh, Energy efficiency as a sector would have incremental GDP growth. We believe that the target energy savings will be able to create over 9 million green jobs. We also believe from the energy security standpoint that close to 46 gigawatt of energy infrastructure upgrades, whether it be on transmission, generation, production, or distribution, can be deferred. And we also are starting the economic studies that would give economic evidence that 182 million tons of oil equivalent, if accelerated in the market, could actually decelerate the rise in energy prices, whether in fuel or electricity. In climate change mitigation, we expect energy efficiency to avoid up to 1.7 gigatons of CO2 through 2040, which should be about a third of the obligations under the Paris Climate Agreement. Something interesting, we often talk about CO2 and gigawatt hours, but I'd like to talk about jobs. When PE2 modeled this before government and before lawmakers, we were able to demonstrate that energy efficiency can generate 45% more jobs than energy transport and water infrastructure project for the same amount of stimulus or capital funding. So for every $1 million of investment, we were able to show that energy efficiency can create up to 37 and a half jobs in the Philippines. And this would create even more jobs than pumping more funding or stimulus funding or capital funding towards the basic infrastructure projects. So this is a better job generator than that infrastructure. And this is why we say that if we succeed in mobilizing $243 billion in energy efficiency capital in the next 2 decades, over 9 million energy efficiency jobs can be created across the countryside. So we hold very close to our heart that energy efficiency is an economic it's an economic boost because it creates jobs across the country. The country has had a national energy efficiency and conservation plan. So from the plan, it has also developed an energy efficiency and conservation roadmap, and it's charted all the way to 2050. Whether it's ambitious or realistic, I think the numbers will still evolve, and the targets will still be improved. But the point that the government is making, energy efficiency will involve shaving off demand across all end use sector, whether they be government, commercial, residential, industrial, transport, and even utilities own energy use. It's been a 4-decade journey for the energy efficiency law in the Philippines. We were among the first in Southeast Asia to have a law, an energy conservation law in 1980. The problem is, or the problem was, that it only had a 5-year validity. So the energy conservation law was a band-aid remedy in response only to oil embargoes due to a Middle East crisis in the early 80s. So that law lapsed in 1985, and another law, extended it to by another 5 years to 1990. But that also lapsed in 1990. In the next 29 years, we saw an energy efficiency bill refiled so many times from the 8th Congress to the 17th Congress. So that was a painful, long break or pause in being back into the voluntary energy efficiency policy regime. But the blessing was this, that energy efficiency emerged as a stronger intervention than energy conservation, in that both energy efficiency and conservation was mainstream as a way of life. And this, I'm just quoting the words of the Department of Energy in the Philippines. And the third positive change through the bill as it got refiled was that ESCOs and third-party investors are now incentivized as upfront capital or investors in energy efficiency projects. So in 2019, the law was finally passed and signed into law, and we call it the Republic Act 11285, closing 29 years of being back in the voluntary energy efficiency regime. So this Republic Act 11285, or what we call the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, defines roles of government. It in fact includes the creation of an interagency energy efficiency committee, a committee where 9 cabinet ministers get together and direct the strategic policy for the whole of government. It certifies energy efficiency professionals and ESCOs. It sets energy performance standards for all energy consuming products and vehicles and buildings. It sets obligations of commercial, industrial, and transport establishments. It gives DOE, the Department of Energy, visitorial powers. It grants fiscal incentives, non-fiscal, and then concessional finance. And it includes other features, demand-side management for utilities, waste management for all retired energy assets. It strengthens the organization of the Department of Energy and includes even penal provisions. You know, I would like to see other energy efficiency law. Our renewable energy law does not have penal provisions, but you may be surprised that the energy efficiency law, because it has to change behavior, not only does it dangle carrots, but it whacks a big stick, because it gives up to 5 years of criminal liability or up to $2 million in fines to an individual for any violation of the law. three other takeaways from the law. It involves the government and the whole of government. So even state-owned enterprises or government-owned and controlled corporations, and down to the levels of the local government units, the cities, the municipalities. It is a very inclusive as far as private sector users are concerned, because all commercial, industrial, and transport end users consuming at least 50,000 kilowatt hours now have to comply with the obligations. And lastly, it removes foreign ownership restrictions. A energy efficiency project meeting a certain size or threshold can be 100% foreign owned if registered in the Philippines. An ESCO could now be 100% foreign owned as long as incorporated as a domestic subsidiary in the Philippines. So the law has basically succeeded in removing foreign ownership restrictions ahead of the renewable energy law. This is interesting because this is the lowest consumption threshold in Southeast Asia. Anyone consuming at least 50,001 kilowatt hours annually in fuel and electricity now face a long list of obligations under the law. So they now have to submit mandatory annual energy efficiency and conservation reports done online. They now should hire a certified energy manager. They should have a mandatory level 2 energy audit every 3 years. They should meet if you're building an energy utilization index or building energy index, or if you're in a transport fleet, a vehicle and fleet fuel economy performance rating set by government, an energy management system such as ISO 50001 should also be set up. So this is part of the long list of obligations. And 50,001 kilowatt hours is not just a large corporate or mid-market. It's even a small enterprise among the SMEs. So it really goes down market and casts a wider net of end users, creating demand for energy efficiency technology solutions and even ESCO services. The whole of government is now scaling up a government energy management program. There's a mandatory audits also in government. There's a 5-year phase out of low efficiency air conditioning and lighting. There are GEM guidelines that enables innovative procurement, such as ESCO performance contracting, public-private partnership transactions, and joint ventures. And it's not only among the 9 agencies that I speak of, but the President of the Philippines himself has issued a policy, Administrative Order Number 15, accelerating GEM in government. We now see the $243 billion flowing this way. A third of it, or roughly $81 billion through the next 2 decades, will have to flow through business as usual. So what we call as self-financed, debt financed, lease financed, and other on-balance sheet modalities. But the point that PE2 is trying to make today is that the lion's share of over $162 billion will have to flow through innovative structures and vehicles, mainly through off-balance sheet capital flows. And the biggest, most significant type of vehicle to flow off-balance sheet capital flows would be ESCOs. This is why the ESCO sector should be developed, should be mainstreamed, should be engaged with the more procurement and financing mechanisms and modalities. And to deploy or to use the ESCO performance contracts will also be incorporated to public-private partnership transactions through joint venture agreements with state-owned enterprises, and even through large-scale retrofit programs that government may run. There are many bulk purchase, bulk distribution, bulk installation, bulk retrofit programs that government could plan and keep it outside the balance sheet of the end users. In many markets, to prime that capital flow from investors to the end users, in many markets, the financial institution always played a pump priming role, and this is why two government banks and two private banks were pioneers in being debt providers. But the point that we make today is that if that lion's share for the scale up has to be made between now and 2040, there is a much larger pipe to build, and this is the pipe to flow equity capital alongside the parallel pipe of debt capital. And this is why many energy efficiency markets cannot grow, because they become reliant on debt capital. Now, ESCOs will be a main vehicle for equity capital flows. And you see that it is a much larger pipe that will flow capital from the investors through the end users. And this is the role, again, this is the role of ESCOs. So alongside the parallel track for banks, ESCOs will also play a much more significant role of deploying energy efficiency capital through energy efficiency projects. The ESCO market in the Philippines has been growing, and the growth pattern is unique, because I don't see the way it grew in Japan, the way it grew in other parts of Southeast Asia. We all had its unique journeys, and let me describe how it's growing. The government of the Philippines, through the energy efficiency law, has a definition of ESCOs that more or less is in sync or is harmonized with the global definition. So not only does it deliver solutions and services, but it delivers it with some financial exposure with guarantees attached to it. So the definition in the Philippines is not much different from the definition, let's say, of the global ESCO network. There are now two parallel tracks for government for what we call registered ESCO, and this is compatible for even startups and ESCOs with very little experience. And the other track of certified ESCOs, and here you have to show evidence of completed energy efficiency projects delivering results. So that's the basic difference between the registered and the certified ESCO. The registered is also a 3-year license, but the certified ESCO is a much longer 5-year license from government. The number of ESCOs in the registry of government has been growing at an average of 21%. So from a decade ago, it was just over a dozen. It now has more than 4 times that, at over 60 ESCOs as of end of last year. Now, as far as volume, our low side estimate is that in the last decade, $180 million have been invested by ESCOs. And I would say these estimates are very conservative, because this number is just coming from reports of ESCOs who are diligently reporting their project. But there are still a number of ESCOs who are probably still to report. So I would say that the $183 million is a very low side, conservative estimate. The market could be actually larger than that. But P2 estimates this to experience exponential growth through beyond 2030. We see about over $500 million of investments flowing through 2032, and over 1,000 gigawatt hours of aggregate savings during that projection period. The most popular measure of all ESCOs would be chiller plant upgrades. and a little bit on motors, drives, pumps, and compressors. So this is it's now what is also growing in the last 2 years are district cooling systems, and only in the last 2 years also cooling as a service has become mainstream by at least at least two property developers. And then, down the list, you get in isolated cases a few of harmonics correction, chiller optimization, building management system. You've got, of course, a lot of rooftop solar, but down the list, we are expecting, we want the ESCO sector to build more heat-related, combined heat and power and waste heat recovery, industrial fuel switching, district heating, in process efficiency. So this is where we want to take the ESCOs. But air conditioning, HVAC, chiller plant upgrades are still the most popular types of ESCO project types in the last few years. As in most of other ESCO market, it's all about using 80, 85, 90% of energy savings to repay or recoup the investment of the ESCO. Initially, without even the ESCO business model, ESCO or technology and solutions providers are just supporting self-financed energy efficiency projects of end users, not using the performance contracting law model. But this, whether they guarantee the savings or not, it's just a direct purchase without the ESCOs arranging finance. And then the ESCOs, you see this chart in almost most markets. The ESCOs will here are growing just like in North America, where the end user is growing. End user is the one arranging finance. But we're seeing more in the last 2-3 years where the ESCOs now, under the French model, are now the ones arranging finance, whether debt or equity, to pursue their pipeline of projects. What has emerged in the Philippines rather, was that there's a third-party investor or a specialist non-bank equity vehicle that's aggregating several projects and flowing off balance sheet capital to ESCOs, and also providing solutions to end users outside the balance sheet of end users. And they're able to aggregate several of these ESCO contracts, and through the portfolio attract equity capital from corporate shareholders or arrange debt finance from financial institutions. And a good example in the Philippines, well, the only example in the Philippines, is Climergy. And I will be in Istanbul and also talking about this attempt to roll out a super ESCO aggregator of ESCO project assets, which is a first in the region. Now, how the energy efficiency law is helping grow the ESCO market, it cycles across from the very fact that ESCOs are registered or certified, supported by manpower through the certification of energy managers and energy auditors, and then setting or creating market demand by setting obligations through private sector, commercial, industrial, or transport establishments. Then you create another market demand from government through the government energy management program. You make them more commercially viable or have them with better equity or investment returns through tax-based fiscal incentives. And then now you talk about innovative procurement, such as public-private partnership transactions or joint venture agreements, so that more private capital can be deployed even in public sector energy efficiency projects. In that cycle, all the outer peripheral interventions are all provided by the energy efficiency and conservation law, and all are contributing to the steady growth, if not exponential growth, of the ESCO sector. Three other things that I'd like to discuss. Policy also allows the private sector to mobilize up to $5 billion in government energy efficiency project through new procurement modalities. So right now we have a brand new NGPA, what we call the New Government Procurement Act, which allows life cycle cost analysis and life cycle cost-based procurement, and those having the least life cycle cost being the most advantageous versus the traditional initial cost based procurement. So this is now possible, and we want just a clearer language from government to allow the intricacies of ESCO performance contract to be accommodated by the implementing rules and regulations of the new Government Procurement Act. So it's a brand new law, and there's hope that ESCOs can now be procured under this new law. The second is there's also a relatively new PPP code, the Public-Private Partnership Code, which evolved from the Build, Operate, Transfer law. So we expect, several municipalities bundling street lighting projects, several water utilities bundling pump efficiency projects, or several cities and municipalities bundling cooling and lighting for public building retrofits and structuring them as a PPP tender so that private capital and private know-how may flow to these government projects. There's a third modality called the joint venture agreement, and this is through the planning agency called the National Economic or Development Authority, or NEDA, and this applies to state-owned enterprises, or what we call in the Philippines as government-owned and controlled corporations. So the joint venture and the host government agency can actually share equity in a joint venture for an ESCO retrofit of whether it's pumps, motors, cooling, or lighting. So that's all I have for my presentation, and I thank you for your kind attention. I look forward to the questions that you may have posted. Soren, back to you.
Many thanks, Alex, for this fantastic presentation. And as I indicated in the beginning, Philippines is a very advanced market for ESCOs, and I think we got a very good impression of that from your presentation. To all of you out there, please keep using the tab for questions. We already have a number, which I will share with Alex, but keep them coming. We still have another 20 minutes before the hour, so let's get the ball rolling. The first question, Alex, is on the financing. So the question is, who do you foresee would be the main equity capital providers for ESCO investments in the Philippines?
We expect large energy developers, the large energy conglomerates, because they have different energy infrastructure assets. They could have utilities, they could have power plants, they could now growing in clean energy space. So we expect them to be creating a new investment asset class called the energy efficiency asset class. So it is this equity, this kind of equity capital that could flow. Now, they will not probably invest individually in ESCO projects, but they will need an aggregator because they like to invest in tranches of $50 or $100 million, and typically ESCO projects are $1, $2, or $3 million in size. So they will need an aggregator, and an example of aggregator is a super ESCO, and Climergy is there that's ready to flow equity capital from energy developers. Now, it's interesting that it's not only domestic investors, but equity capital investors can also be coming from overseas. We saw inquiries from large utilities in Japan, for example. We see large energy conglomerates, multinationals, energy multinationals who are present in many regions of the world, have also looked into the possibility of investing equity capital. So yes, it's going to be large energy players initially, but I see blending from climate funds or energy sources in the years to come to blend alongside equity capital from energy developers.
Thanks. And maybe I'll jump the queue here on questions, because there's it just came in at the end a question of whether you could see Climergy as the coordinator of bundles of projects under the PPP code. I think you almost answered that question already, but just to pick it up here again, just
Yes,
if you could.
Climergy is open. Climergy is open as long as we are able to understand the risk in private sector would be different in the risk in the public sector, and we just have to structure it differently for government, and see if there could be some blending with the development finance to de-risk that. So I think there is a role for climate funds and development finance, where if Climergy were to aggressively pursue PPP projects or even just plain government projects, regardless of whether it's through a PPP bundle or whether it's a one standalone building, uh, we have to. Climergy has no present exposure right now, government, but we're studying how to de-risk it, and we're hoping that development finance, convertible debt, concessional finance could help us de-risk our exposure to this different type of projects in the public sector.
Thank you. A question on carbon financing. Are there any examples of ESCO projects supplemented with carbon financing? It actually doesn't say in the Philippines, but I guess it would be in the Philippines. So do you have any examples of that? Or are you
Well,
considering that? I mean, is that also something on Climergy's agenda, for instance?
we have, I think, in the first wave of carbon finance a decade ago, it was considered for market wide approaches, like when government was doing massive replacement of lighting at household level. So when you have a long gestation energy efficiency project, whether or not it's implemented by UNESCO, you have the luxury of incorporating carbon finance into it. You, but if you are chasing commercial and industrial opportunities where you have very short project preparation time, then much as you want to blend in carbon finance, I guess the timing that you need in private sector does not allow carbon finance to kick in. In private sector opportunities, when you see a building owner, you should be ready to mobilize and completed with all energy audits and done with your financial structure, let's say after three months, right? So within the 3 month window, you just don't have any opportunity to consider uh, innovative finance such as carbon finance and tucked in. So you need longer gestation projects to incorporate carbon finance. And if it's a market-wide, economy-wide opportunity or country-wide opportunity, or a bundle, let's say Climergy. Can Climergy do it after the fact, bundle all the projects first and pursue carbon finance? That's an opportunity. So you need in probably on a aggregator level or on a portfolio level, you may be able to consider blended finance, green finance, climate funding, or even carbon finance, as the question asked, uh, in a portfolio level rather than small $1 million, $2 million ESCO contracts.
Thanks, and maybe I can chip in here because that's another area that we are working with here at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, the carbon market and the carbon financing, and the one important sort of characteristic of carbon financing is that it's actually not financing; it's cash flow, because it only materializes once you have documented the emissions reduction effect, and that's once you have implemented the project and it's operational. So unless you can bring the carbon contract forward to put it in the bank and so as collateral, so, well, we can raise funding on the basis of this contract, you cannot really use the carbon as financing. You can only use it as a cash flow. But in a financing structure, as you mentioned, Alex, you can incorporate that as in the blending of the financial instruments that you are including, and if that allows you to wait for that cash flow to come in, then it can certainly play a role. There are plenty of methodologies that support the energy efficiency as emissions reduction activity. There's a question here which is not on financing actually, and that goes to one of your very first points on job creation, where the question is whether if $1 million is in infrastructure needs fewer people, isn't that good? Isn't that more productive? What is
Uh,
the
yeah,
rationale in terms of the more the merrier? Why is that?
no, all I'm saying is yes, infrastructure creates 20 plus jobs, right? For $1 million. But all I'm saying, and that's a big number. It's a big number because infrastructure projects from other parts of the world are only in their teens per $1 million. So infrastructure by itself is if you're in the lower 20s, that's a big number of jobs for every $1 million. Now the point that I made earlier, and sorry if I was unclear, energy efficiency creates 45% more jobs than infrastructure. So instead of the lower 20s, we're now creating 37 and a half jobs for every $1 million invested in energy efficiency. So we're just comparing, and that comparison was useful because government accepts, whether policymakers, the budget people, or Department of Energy or Department of Public Works, they accept that they should invest more in infrastructure. But I said, hang on, we're creating more jobs in energy efficiency. So if you value infrastructure, then you should value energy efficiency even more. So that's the point that we make, that the energy efficiency is 45% more labor intensive for the same amount of investment, the same volume of investment than the traditional energy, transport, and water infrastructure. So they're both good job generators. The infrastructure is a good job generator, no question. China is doing that. Rest of Southeast Asia is doing that. But what I'm saying is, if you want even a superior job generator, consider energy efficiency. So that's what we're telling policy makers and economic planners.
Okay, thank you. So you got that cleared. Um, are there any incentives from the government for performance contracts or ESCO projects?
Well, there are, and the fiscal incentives are largely tax. First, the fiscal incentives are largely tax based, and it's been so there are income tax holidays for of 4 to 7 years, depending on the location of your ESCO project. If you if your ESCO project is an urban center or a metropolis, then you hug towards the 4 or 5 years. But if you bring it to the countryside, then you get the maximum of 6, 7 years of income tax holiday. So this will improve. Your commercial viability or equity return. Uh, Another incentive is the grant of duty-free importation of capital equipment. So you can bring in your chillers, your boilers, your motors from abroad duty free, as long as it is registered to the project. There are also other incentives, or what we call enhanced deductions. Let's say you train your staff to be, and then you get them certified. There are bigger deductibles now for tax deductibles for income tax, for training and certification of your ESCO professionals. There are also deductions if you are doing cooling as a service and you're buying input energy such as electricity. There's now a larger deductible now, 100% extra deductible for electricity expense if you're doing a cooling as a service a project. So yes, there are incentives available. It's just been rolled out in the market, and PE2 is just doing its getting the word across and encouraging our ESCOs to avail of the fiscal incentives. But the essence or the very objective is to improve the after-tax internal rate of return, or the equity return of the every dollar that's invested in capex for the ESCO project.
And those, just to make it clear, because in many markets we see that those incentives are actually not directed at ESCOs, but at energy efficiency in general. And many times ESCOs are in fact disfavored in those programs. Is it correctly understood that in Philippines it's the other way around, that these programs are actually directed at the ESCOs and not as owner investors that just invest in their own efficient chillers? Is that correctly understood?
I'm glad you asked that. The government grants more incentive. Both are incentivized, whether it's the building owners or the factory owners, or what we call the self-finance, or whether it's ESCO or third-party project developers. Both are incentivized. But the level of incentives of the ESCOs and third-party developers are double that of the self-financed. Why? Because ESCOs are investing in capital assets in premises that they neither own nor lease, right? So they're taking more upfront risk. They're taking financing risk. They're taking supervisory. Their overhead is much larger. They're providing O&M compared to the self-finance, which is their O&M is on their balance sheets, but this one is O&M that's even off balance sheet. So yes, because the ESCOs are taking more risk, we succeeded in convincing government that the ESCOs and third-party project developers should have a bigger carrot, more incentives because of that bigger risk exposure than the self-financed building owner or factory owner, because the asset sits already, the asset that is installed in his premises is already owned by that entity or by that person.
I really hope that all the regulators out there are listening, because this is not what we see in any other market, in fact. So as I also mentioned in the beginning, this is Philippines is the market you look at if you want to see how things should be done. So here's one example which is really differentiating the Philippine market from other markets. There are two questions here also. One is regarding is there any programs for large-scale rollout of efficient appliances? We've seen that for LEDs in some markets. Or is there any programs like that in Philippines?
Well, there was one. I was still in the Asian Development Bank at that time, a decade ago, and there was a massive light lamp replacement program that was done through the Department of Energy with ADB loan assistance, and they replaced over 13 million. So this was over a decade ago. They washed out the very last of the incandescent bulbs during that wave. in replaced at that time, not with LEDs. At that time, it was still very high spec compact fluorescent lamps, or CFLs. And then for buildings, it was migrating from the T12 to high efficiency electronic ballasted T5 linear or tubular fluorescent lamps. And then there was also LED for traffic signals. So that was a lighting market transformation project. And I like to mention that because it's one way of finance. Yes, you're bringing in technology, but I like to look at it this way. It's when a government is financing forced obsolescence of a low efficiency technology. And that's what you need. Financing the forced obsolescence. And I think that if ever the government or any government replicates that, we should do that for motors. We should do that for air conditioners. We should do that for refrigerators. Draw inspiration. The mechanism is there, as you did in the lighting program, but add sophistication to the model, but you can do it for much larger appliances. So beyond the first lighting program, there is always hope that we could do it for larger appliances, cooling appliances, for example.
Okay, when I can think of questions in that regard where ESCOs may be disadvantaged if somebody is picking out the cash cows from installations and we do this as replacement. You can do all the other things which are less profitable, but these we will take over with this program. But anyway, we don't have much time. I would like to ask one last question on the list here, which is, and I think it goes to the incentives that were mentioned before, that you incentivize these investments, but there could also be enforcement of implementation of all those when you have mandatory energy audits. But is there any enforcement of implementation of the identified emissions reduction of energy efficiency potentials in those audits?
Well, in the government energy management program, keep in mind, in the yesteryears, the Department of Energy or the Energy Ministry was working by itself. Today, we have an interagency. So we remove the silos, and then we have the environment, the finance ministry, the budget and management, the public works ministry, all working together now out of their silos. So the energy ministry or the energy agency called the DOE, it need not enforce it by itself. And then here comes PE2 as part of civil society. We of course will have to help government with monitoring, with whatever government needs to monitor. And then there's the development community also assisting. Multilateral development banks, international development agencies also play a role in helping government not only implement but also monitor and enforce the law and monitor all the impacts and interventions in the market.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex. This has
My
been
pleasure.
most interesting. And I'm really looking forward to listen to your presentation again in Istanbul in less than a month from now, but more or less precisely a month from now. And I really hope that many of you out there has also found it interesting and would be considering to join us also in Istanbul for our 1.5-day program. Please check in on our website. You would be able to find not only the invitation for the Second International ESCO Symposium, but also in a little week's time, I'm sure Aris will have an improved or redacted or streamlined version of this webinar uploaded on our website, and you can download it there and revisit Alex's points and the Philippine market as it has been presented today. So thank you very much, everybody out there. Thank you again, Alex. Looking forward to see you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.